I want to cross to Canberra, though, now and catch up with Professor Peter Collignon again to get the latest on flattening of the curve, what it all means and how we can plan for the future. Thanks for joining us again, Peter. You must be really stoked by the numbers. As somebody who studies epidemics and understands how this works, you would have had all sorts of scenarios about how this might play out. Surely this is a best-case scenario in terms of the effect of the social distancing measures.
Well, so far, Australia's curve has not only flattened, but our epidemic curve is going the right direction, which is down, which is the total amount of new cases per day. And importantly, we've probably achieved what we might want to achieve, at least in the short to medium term. Whether it's New South Wales or Australia-wide, the number of new cases that are occurring is not only going down, but more importantly, the locally transmitted cases are going down. And they've been going down since the 25th of March. So my own view is, look, a lot of states have gone into lockdown, but I just really wonder whether we needed to go that far, because what's the end game here? We're going to have a problem till the end of our winter. So whatever we do, we're probably going to have to continue till September, October. Now, I quite understand why the PM and everybody said, look, this Easter is going to be a bit different because, yes, we've got a flattening in the curve, and yes, we've got a flattening in local transmission as well. But maybe we need to wait a week and two and see. But a lot of what we're doing now is more appropriate for if you lived in New York or London rather than in Australia, or even in Canberra, for instance, we've got either minimal or no community transmission. Because I don't understand how we're going to decide when to take this off. And New Zealand had a lockdown very early, and their figures don't look as good as ours.
Now, I think that's a very important point, because also, as you can explain to us, the effect we're seeing now and we've seen this week, of course, is not from these most strident measures. It's from measures that were in place a fortnight or so ago. So we've tightened even further since we've really done the heavy lifting, which suggests that there is time to start discussing very seriously about what we might be able to ease back.
Well, I think that's really important. I mean, to some degree, we've got an experiment going on. We've got New Zealand that went hard early with lockdown. We've got Victoria that's harder than New South Wales, which is harder than Queensland. And then South Australia may be, in fact, one of the ones that aren't as strong. Now, it'll be important to see what is the difference in the rate of community spread in all those three areas. If there really isn't a lot of difference, it implies that going all the way with lockdowns is inappropriate at this point of time when we've got little transmission in the community. And all the hard lifting was from putting 1 million people out of work, but closing the clubs, closing the pubs, closing the restaurants, people realising that their hands are the way this transmits, plus their nose and their mouth, and therefore keeping the 2 metre distance, because droplets are the way this spreads, means you're really minimising your risk of getting this infection. And people are doing that. But when we start saying you can't sit outside on a park bench, or you can't drive in a car with other members of your family, where there's no increased risk from what I can see if you socially distance and keep the 2 metres, I wonder how we're going to keep everybody on side, especially with whatever we do. I think we're going to have to continue to September or October.
Yeah, look, we've got to have this discussion very carefully, because, as you say, it's very clear from the numbers and from what you've been saying to us week in, week out here, that it was, of course, shutting restaurants and pubs and clubs and getting very serious about social distancing that has delivered it us to this point. So we've got to start to tell us what sort of measures you would wind back first. Would it be these restrictions on social gatherings? You know, you could have slightly bigger gatherings, at least allow people to get around and visit each other. And what about this idea that what we ought to do is ease off first in states like South Australia and Western Australia, where there's less of a problem, see how they go for a week or two at least, before then perhaps easing off in New South Wales and Victoria?
Well, I think whatever we do will take at least 5 days and maybe 10 days to see an effect, either bad or good, because the incubation period is 5 days. So even if we turned off everything now, you wouldn't expect an effect in under 5 days. And I can tell you what I think we shouldn't take off. I think we're going to have to keep our borders closed. We're going to have to quarantine return visitors. We have to quarantine close contacts. We have to keep that up. And what we have to do is a lot of testing and even more testing, so we know where this is and can find all the cases and, clamp it down. But the first things I'd take off is this business about not going to go fishing by yourself, or go and sit on a park bench, or go for a drive in the car with
go to the
people.
Beach.
or go to the beach, providing the beach isn't crowded. But everybody knows they're at risk as well as putting other people at risk if you go into a crowd. So what the police need to do is police the things that are obviously bad, parties at home with lots of people, or crowded venues where not too many people should be there. And that's what we've really got to crack down on. But a lot of these other things, well, I think we should start taking off. And another serious thing we've got to look at is schools. I mean, the reality is that children really seem to get this less frequently. This is different to flu, where you would close schools. But they get it less frequently, and they also have less complications. Not that they can't, but schools are really fundamental. Are we going to close them for 6 months? What we need to do is protect the people at school who are at risk, which is anybody over the age of 70, I think, should not go, and anybody over the age of 50 with heart problems, etc., shouldn't be there, or be in an office doing administrative work or online work, and, whether you make that 50 or 60. So we know how we can do that and not put too many people at risk, and the parents need to socially distance. But things like that, we need to have a discussion, because otherwise we're going to close everything down for 6 months, even though Australia is in the best position in the world, and Singapore and other places like Korea, who are in winter, or in Singapore not, they're actually still getting ongoing transmission. But Singapore in particular is because they didn't close their clubs, their bars and their museums. And that may be one of the reasons that they're seeing an increase in cases and we're not. So we need to learn from what we've done. What is the difference between New Zealand, Queensland, Victoria, South Australia? What is the difference between us and Korea, Singapore? What have they done right? What have they done wrong? And then make sensible decisions so that we can keep on with society to some degree, not paralyse society, but minimise the risk for everyone, because we don't want to do the Sweden experiment, I think, but not actually have it so that we've basically paralysed our 6 months. We're going to be in the position where, even though we've got the least amount of transmission and done it better everywhere in the world, I suspect the Northern Hemisphere will relax a lot of stuff in their summer, but we're in our winter, so we're going to have to keep it on. So we need to be very careful how we take these on and off, and really measure the effect of what we do.
You're a professor at the ANU, Peter. Are you able to feed this advice, these views, directly into the policy process at all?
Well, I think I'm mainly doing it via the media. I am involved in infection control and prevention, because that's my specialty, and I've done a lot for 30 years. And obviously I talk to lots of people, but in some ways I'm better off being independent, so I can voice my views.
Indeed. I appreciate you doing that for us. Thanks for joining us again, Peter.
Thank you.